In this module, we examine spatial diversity in the United States, which exists at all levels of our society, at our national borders, in hybrid spaces scholars call cultural borderlands, in different regions of the country, and in our cities, suburbs, subdivisions, workplaces, where we shop, and even at home. Spatial diversity and the borderlands concept are particularly powerful ways of seeing and thinking about diversity in the United States because these approaches allow us to see diversity on the ground. Moreover, because of suburbanization in the United States, which since World War II has become a dominant mode of residence, we're often more separated than ever, if not by race and nationality, in increasing global America than by class. To give just one example, the boundaries between cities and suburbs or between urban neighborhoods can mark important shifts in racial, ethnic, and class dynamics. By the end of this module, you should be able to use anthropological perspectives to analyze, interpret, and reflect how spatial diversity operates in various sites in the U.S., cities and suburbs, neighborhoods, borders. Use basic ethnographic approaches to identify, describe, and analyze spatial diversity and cultural borderlands in the United States. And demonstrate critical thinking and intercultural knowledge by using the borderlands concept and anthropological perspectives and techniques in an ethnographic writing assignment. This assignment will be introduced in this module and submitted later in the course. We'll begin with 4 film clips that point to spatial diversity and borders. The border Issues in the Arizona-Sonora Borderlands examines the impact of increasing border enforcement on the Tono O'odham Nation split by the U.S.-Mexico border. Money Divides Blacks and Whites in Ferguson from CNN looks at racial and spatial divisions in Ferguson, Missouri, a racially mixed community north of St. Louis and site of the 2014 killing by a police officer of an 18-year-old African-American man, Michael Brown. This led both to peaceful protests and rioting in the community. Heritage Hills, Colorado gated community is a promotional video for an upscale gated community in suburban Denver that advertises a lifestyle apart from the ordinary. It helps to set up Setha Lowe's article, A Nation of Gated Communities, which we'll read in this module. And finally, Poverty in the Suburbs profiles a 30-year-old suburban mom who works full-time, shares a house with her mother, and lives below the poverty line. This PBS story subtly challenges our dominant perspective on the suburbs as filled with comfortable middle-class and affluent families, as well as our ideas about spatial diversity. After you view these clips, you'll participate in a discussion on Canvas with your colleagues. There are 3 presentations in this module. The first 2 look at some of the ways we think anthropologically about space and place, as well as spatial diversity in the U.S. The third discusses the cultural borderlands concept. You'll need this concept for your second ethnographic assignment introduced at the end of the module. The third assignment gives you some examples from student papers on cultural borderlands here in southwestern Ohio. It looks at borders between local residents and immigrant populations, particularly Mexicans, as well as at class borders between mostly working-class Hamilton and a nearby middle-class suburb, as well as racialized suburban borders between middle-class subdivisions and Section 8 enclaves. I hope that these examples of student writing will give you some ideas for your upcoming Borderlands ethnography papers. They also illustrate how we might make sense of the concepts of borders and borderlands here in the heartland to think about spatial diversity. These presentations and examples of student writing are followed by a quiz. In addition to the sample of student writing on cultural borderlands, there are 3 readings in this module. In Curing the Rust Belt, Alison Goebel looks at changing race and class conditions and socioeconomic borders in post-industrial Mansfield, Ohio. Goebel traces the changing fortunes of this small city and the challenges faced by long-term residents and younger residents as once booming factories have shuttered and left the area. In recent years, the economy has shifted to a healthcare economy which has brought new, well-educated residents to town, but which has failed to provide viable opportunities for longer-term residents. This has created new class and spatial divides between affluent outsiders with little investment in the area and working class, working poor, and poor residents. In A Nation of Gated Communities, Setha Lowe reflects on the paradox of gated communities that pretend to provide enhanced security for residents while simultaneously fueling race and class fears. Lowe suggests that gated communities claim to provide enhanced community for those inside the gates, but disrupt a broader sense of community between suburb and city in access to open public space and within the American tradition of integration and social justice. Finally, in Chapter 2 of Renegade Dreams, Lawrence Ralph explores ideas of memory, history, and nostalgia as Eastwood residents reflect on the history of the Divine Knights gang from the 1960s to the present. This enables Ralph to portray the changing history and role of the gang that had been involved in the Civil Rights Movement and President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty to the current generation of gang leaders who compare their youth with that of present-day renegades. These readings are followed by study questions in Canvas. At the end of Module 6, I'll also introduce Ethnographic Observation 2 on cultural borders and borderlands. Here, I'll ask you to identify and observe a cultural borderland in your community or a nearby one. You should visit this border area, describe it from both sides of the border, and pay attention to both border maintenance and border crossings. In addition to visiting this cultural space, you may also speak with people to gain insight into how they discursively construct, maintain, and resist borders. Then you'll draw on some of the spatial and borderlands concepts in this module to help you analyze your ethnographic description. Your paper will be due at the end of Module 9. In the next module, we'll look at gender diversity, the cultural construction of gender and sexuality, and the changing U.S. landscape when it comes to sex and gender, particularly with regard to transgender people in gay marriage.